When people think of a nuclear detonation, they usually imagine two things: an intense flash of light, followed by a devastating fireball, and the mushroom cloud that follows behind it. All of these are the visible signs of a nuclear blast. But what about the things you can't see? Believe it or not, there are many dangers to a nuclear explosion that can actually take years to fully manifest. Let's say that a nuclear bomb has just detonated. After the bright flash and the fireball, you might notice that a massive amount of debris has now filled the air. This is everything from the remains of the building that was directly above the bomb to pieces of the earth itself that have been vaporized by the heat. These particles will form the stem of the infamous mushroom cloud. But more importantly, they will form a wall of superheated air around the epicenter of the blast. This wall of air, often called the fireball, will expand outwards at incredible speeds. It'll start off small, but then rapidly grow to be thousands of feet across in only a few seconds. It may not look like much from the outside, but anything caught inside this wall of air is going to get utterly obliterated. The temperature of this fireball can reach up to 300 million degrees Fahrenheit, which is over 20 times hotter than the surface of the sun. Anyone who has ever held a magnifying glass over a piece of paper knows how powerful a simple concentration of heat can be. So just imagine being inside a literal furnace the size of a house. Anything unlucky enough to be caught inside the fireball will be turned into a pile of ash before even having a chance to react. This includes people, vehicles, and even entire buildings. But once the fireball starts to fade away, another danger starts to emerge: thermal radiation. A lot of the energy released during a nuclear detonation is in the form of thermal radiation. Unlike light waves, thermal radiation is invisible to the human eye, but it can still burn you just as effectively as if you were being grilled by the sun. In fact, this thermal radiation is the reason why the ground directly below a nuclear explosion is usually completely scorched. But this isn't just a problem for those standing directly under the bomb. In some cases, it can also cause fires miles away from the epicenter. Thermal radiation doesn't just disappear after the blast. It takes several days for all of it to dissipate. During this time, anyone caught outside will need to wear special radiation shielding in order to avoid getting burned. But wait, there's more. The thermal radiation also heats the surface of the Earth, causing serious burns to anything that comes into contact with it. And since the surface of the Earth is so large, it absorbs a huge amount of the radiation, heating it to extreme temperatures. This means that for weeks after the initial explosion, survivors will need to avoid all contact with the ground. But since the blast wave from the explosion would have destroyed any shelters in the area, they're going to be hard to come by. The only places that would be safe from both the thermal radiation and the fallout would be deep underground bunkers. But these are rare, so most survivors will probably head for the hills instead, hoping to escape the immediate blast zone. And this is where they'll find the next danger: radiation. Nuclear bombs utilize the process of nuclear fission in order to create their destructive power. In short, this means that they split atoms to release energy. But this splitting of the atoms doesn't always happen in a neat little package. Sometimes, when an atom is split, the resulting particles will fly off and eventually turn into different types of radiation. Radiation is one of the most well-known dangers of nuclear war. But what a lot of people don't know is that there are actually 3 main types of radiation, that each pose a unique threat to the human body. The first type is alpha radiation. Alpha radiation consists of positively charged particles that aren't very penetrating. They can't even pass through a sheet of paper. That being said, if they manage to get inside the body, they can do a lot of damage. Imagine a tiny ball of mass, the size of a proton, flying at your flesh at over 90,000 miles per hour. That's how fast an alpha particle moves. When something this small and fast collides with a human cell, it's almost guaranteed to destroy it. Alpha radiation can lead to severe radiation poisoning and eventually death. The second type of radiation is gamma radiation. Gamma radiation is what you've probably seen in movies when they show a character getting irradiated. It's high-energy photons that can penetrate through the human body and even lead. Gamma radiation is highly dangerous, but not quite as dangerous as alpha radiation. Still, it can definitely kill a person if they're exposed to too much of it. Then there's neutron radiation. And here's where things get really gross. Neutron radiation is made up of electrically neutral particles called neutrons. And unlike alpha and gamma radiation, they're extremely difficult to block. Gamma rays can be stopped by several inches of lead, but neutrons can still penetrate a foot of concrete. Now, normally a neutron wouldn't be too dangerous on its own. They don't carry an electrical charge, so they don't interact with matter very well. But as soon as they collide with a nucleus, they cause something called nuclear transmutation. Basically, they transform the atoms of whatever they hit into a different element. So let's say a neutron collides with a nitrogen atom found in your DNA. It could turn that nitrogen atom into carbon, which then causes the rest of the atom to become radioactive and emit gamma radiation. This is bad because now your cells are emitting lethal levels of radiation. Even if the original neutron didn't kill you, your body is now slowly killing itself. Exposure to high levels of radiation can cause radiation poisoning, hair loss, organ failure, and even cancer. There's no way to fully avoid radiation when you're anywhere near a nuclear blast. But what you can do is minimize exposure. If you want to survive a nuclear detonation, it's best to lie flat on the ground, facing down. This way, if the explosion happens overhead, you'll have less of the radiation particles hitting you directly. However, surviving the initial explosion is only half the battle. Even if you manage to avoid the fireball, radiation, and thermal burns, you'll need to deal with the aftermath. First, there's the nuclear winter. The initial blast will blow most of the dust and smoke into the atmosphere. This dust will reflect sunlight back into space, cooling the surface of the Earth and blocking out the sun. It'll be dark as night for months, even during the day. And this darkness will prevent plants from photosynthesizing, leading to the collapse of the food chain. But the lack of sunlight will also affect people directly. Human beings need sunlight in order to produce vitamin D. Without enough vitamin D, the bones start to become soft and weak, making even walking incredibly painful. And if this wasn't bad enough, the explosion would have also created a massive shockwave. While the initial explosion creates a fireball, the rapid expansion of air creates a shockwave that spreads outward like a ripple in a pond. For people far enough away from the initial blast, this shockwave is what does them in. The shockwave will level buildings, uproot trees, and throw cars around like toys. The wind from the shockwave can easily reach 100 miles per hour, so it's important to get away from windows and other flying debris. But for those who are close enough to the epicenter, the shockwave is just another danger to add to the list. After the shockwave passes, another problem emerges: nuclear fallout. When the bomb explodes, it leaves behind a cloud of particles, along with a bunch of radioactive debris. Over the next few days, these particles will slowly fall back down to the surface in what's known as fallout. People who are exposed to fallout can suffer from radiation poisoning and even die. Even worse, the fallout can contaminate food sources, making it unsafe to eat. This means that people will need to ration the food they have until the fallout dissipates. But the fallout can remain dangerous for months or even years. In extreme cases, the fallout can seep into the groundwater, contaminating it and making it unsafe to drink. Entire cities can be evacuated due to dangerous levels of fallout, and rescue workers are usually the ones who get the worst of it. After a nuclear blast, it's recommended that everyone stay indoors and keep their windows shut to avoid inhaling the radioactive fallout. The last thing to consider is the electromagnetic pulse. Many people forget that nuclear explosions are also a serious cyber attack waiting to happen. The immense amount of energy released by a nuclear blast can mess with electronics miles away. If you're lucky enough to survive the explosion, you might find that your cell phone and other electronic devices no longer work. And if you're unlucky, you might find that the explosion took out the electrical grid, leaving you without power for weeks or even months. EMPs have the potential to cripple major cities, knocking out communications and transportation systems. A single nuclear explosion can take out everything from satellites to power stations, leaving us in a technological stone age. Basically, a nuclear detonation is catastrophic in every way imaginable. If you hear one go off, you should consider yourself extremely lucky if you survive the initial explosion. Just make sure you stay indoors and avoid the radioactive fallout. But do you think we'll ever see a real-life nuclear detonation? Probably not. It's a good thing there's only 13 nuclear powers in the world, and that most of them are pretty chill countries like Canada, France, and Switzerland. Well, maybe not Switzerland. Now check out what would happen if the sun went out. Or check out this video instead.